High 75. Partly cloudy tonight, low 49. Rain tomorrow, the high 67. I'm Steve Williams. I am 560. The Answer.
54 at O'Hare, 50 Lakefront, 57 Midway. Your next news update, 6:30. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the IRS Radio Hour with Stephen Leahy. Every Sunday afternoon at 5 on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and let's get right to it. We're pleased to be joined by our friend Dominic Green, Life and Arts Editor of Spectator USA, also a contributor to the Journal and the New Criterion. He's got a piece over at spectator.us about the gentleman who is now the point person for the British response to the coronavirus spread since Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is incapacitated and has been transferred to intensive care, as everybody knows from yesterday.
Yeah, but he's conscious and he's not on a ventilator. He's getting oxygen treatments.
The Foreign Secretary is now stepping in for Boris Johnson. His name is Dominic Raab, if I'm pronouncing that right. For more on the entire situation there, pleased to be joined by Dominic Green. Dominic, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. So give us a handle on, as Amy was describing, on Boris Johnson's condition and prognosis to the extent the public knows, and then also the backstory on the gentleman filling in for him.
Well, as you know, one of the terrible things about this virus is the way that it can drag out and then suddenly worsen. And this is what happened to Johnson, who 10 days after he was diagnosed suddenly became much less well. He'd been working all the way through. Was taken into hospital on Sunday, and then 24 hours later, on Monday evening, London time, was put into intensive care. As Amy was saying, he's not on a ventilator. He's receiving oxygen, though. And the crucial figure is this, that at St Thomas's Hospital in London, they'll put you into a ventilator if you require 15 litres of oxygen a day. And he, they say, is currently receiving 4. So they're being careful. But nevertheless, he's pretty ill.
Do you know, did his fever spike? What kind of ailments did he have that he got to this position?
He'd had high temperature and coughing all the way through, apparently, this 10-day period. And again, he had continued working. He's one of those people who doesn't believe in being ill, and he's extremely driven. And, of course, this is not a moment when he felt able to step back from the task, because this is an unprecedented crisis. And, of course, now all of this responsibility falls, for the next few days at least, on Dominic Raab.
Tell us about him.
Well, Raab is an ally of Johnson's in the sense that he was perhaps even stronger in favour of Brexit than Johnson was. Raab is a black belt in karate, which is probably useful when it comes to keeping the cabinet in line. He is the Foreign Secretary, which is one of the 3 great offices, as they're known, and he's also the first Secretary of State, who is the de facto Deputy PM. It's often the case in Britain that we don't have a system where there's a fixed job in the sense of Vice President Pence having a position. The Deputy is... It could be one of several people, but if you're the first secretary, that's your job. And he is known to be a good manager and a very driven, competent person. What he might not have, and we don't know this yet, is the ability to lead, to have the kind of charisma that Johnson has, or the sense of humor that he brings to things, which are all vital at a moment like this.
And give us also a handle, we want to kind of span the globe and understand where different countries are at, particularly against the backdrop yesterday of Germany announcing that as of April 20th, they're beginning the reopening of their country with certain measures. It's going to be a phased process. But Britain has north of 50,000 cases and 5,000 deaths. Where do things stand in the UK in terms of the response and the trajectory of that response?
Well, this is the big question, and this is the kind of question that Dominic Raab is going to quite possibly have to face, because even if Boris Johnson is out of hospital in the next 24 hours, and of course we're all hoping he is, he's going to need complete rest in order to recover. And it's in that next 2 to 3 week period that leaders are going to have to make this decision, the same one that President Trump has discussed. At what point the numbers and the risk of getting sick, at what point is that outweighed by the economic damage that is being done and the need to get some kind of economy back to work? And the same question is arising in Britain at roughly the same time as it is for Germany and for the US. So at some point after Easter, there must be a decision to be made, and that's not far away. And so Dominic Raab is probably the one who is going to have to make that judgment.
And I have to ask this question because, Dan, you're going to roll your eyes, but how is Prince Charles doing?
Well, Dan will be delighted to know that Prince Charles, who had relatively mild symptoms, has made apparently an excellent recovery and is pottering around in his garden in Scotland quite happily.
Thank God.
Oh, phew.
No, obviously, I'm glad. Actually, I'm serious. Of course, I'm glad everybody recovers. I want everybody to recover who's afflicted with it, obviously, but the royal family is probably at the bottom of the list.
Okay, fine.
Anyway, what has been the British people's response to the government's response? Is Boris Johnson and his administration receiving relatively high marks for the response?
Yes, and they're, despite the fact, in a way, that they tried this herd immunity strategy of simply hoping that everyone would get it quickly, and it simply overloaded the hospitals. But now, if you look at the figures in Britain, they're no worse than they are for France or Spain or Italy or Germany, countries which didn't take this approach. And generally speaking, I think there's been a trust in the government's judgment, perhaps because, as with President Trump, whose numbers have also improved for this similar reasons, the coronavirus vindicates key positions of Johnson's campaign. He's somebody who believes in borders, believes in independence, and so on. And these are things, of course, which coronavirus has, in a way, underlined. Also, there's an enormous surge of public support for the National Health Service, which is, state-run and is in a way part of the government, and it's hard to unpick those two things. So Johnson and the government, I would say, are generally being approved of, and the system is in its creaky way working. But one of the things which is kind of shocking and also different from the US is that the coronavirus has really gone through the upper levels of British government in a way that it hasn't here. That not just Johnson, also his key advisors, several key ministers as well, are all ill or isolating or have been tested and found positive. It's really taken away the whole leadership echelon, but the system itself seems to be running. Today, Dominic Raab chaired the daily coronavirus emergency meeting, and all went off as normal. So we have to hope that in the coming weeks, people will come back to work and everything will carry on.
Is the culture in Britain? I'm just too far removed from it. Is it the sort of implacable, stiff upper lip? Is that still the public's reaction to crises like this, or am I hearkening back to a Churchillian era that no longer?
Well, I think you are, and I think, given the chance, most British people do. That we're never happier than when we're up against it. There is that joke, I think Bette Midler said, that, when it's 20 to 1 in the morning in New York, it's still 1940 in London. And there is a sense that people, the Blitz spirit is something that people will be more than happy to use. To have a finest hour is a great opportunity in a sense. So I do think people are rising to the occasion, as they have in many, many places, including, of course, the US. That this is a collective disaster, and it requires people to pull together like that.
Hey, Dominic, did Boris Johnson, did he have any underlying health conditions that we may not have known about?
Not really, no. He's not a smoker. He's a mild drinker. He not perhaps the lightest of figures, but as a man in his mid-50s goes, he could be in worse shape. He's obviously enormously physically strong, but as we know, these things are no guarantee of a quick recovery with this virus. But what he doesn't have is any of those underlying conditions which would put him into a high-risk category.
All right, well, that's all good news. He is Dominic Green, life and arts editor of Spectator USA, contributor to the Wall Street Journal and the New Criterion. Dominic, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, always a pleasure. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If your family depends on your income and something happened to you, what would happen to them? You need life insurance, and Selectquote can help you get it at a price you can afford.
Selectquote found Jacob, 40, who's in excellent health, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for only $19 a month.
Not in perfect health? Don't worry.
Selectquote found Tanya, 40, who has type 2 diabetes, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for only $32 a month.
We shop companies like Protective, Prudential, American General, and others to find you the company with the best rates. Give your family the security they need at a price you can afford.
For your free quote, call 1-800-881-4747. That's 1-800-881-4747. Or go to selectquote.com. That's 1-800-881-4747.
Selectquote. We shop, you save.
Get full details on the example policies at selectquote.com/commercials. Your premium could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
Hey, our only defense against this virus right now is our immune system. And you can reduce your anxiety when you take